This is an overview of a very British Civil War political metagaming. This is mainly for the political officers whose role involves a bit of time dealing with mechanics, and for the rest of the turn they will then go off and do their normal negotiating. Senior commanders don't have to worry too much about this, but you should be aware of what your players are doing. The key thing that the political officers need to bear in mind is that part of their job is to raise funds for the party. This will allow you to carry out military operations and also purchase additional resources to help you achieve your aims. It's really important that you don't just sit with what you've got. It's really important that you try and make sure towns declare for you and, if possible, occupy them as well. This will maximise your revenue. The key idea behind the political game is that it is resolved on a town-by-town basis. The politics that we're looking at in your case are local. This also means that at each political table we really only want one person laying the counters and cards for each faction, just to make sure things are really clear and we finish promptly. Here we have a number of political counters. Please ignore the paint job. The purple looked much better until the camera came out. Everyone will have round about 10 counters to start with, but it does depend on your individual faction, and some will have more than others. The idea is that the reverse of the counters should be kept hidden for most of the turn, because really we want players playing counters blind. We don't want them to do too much calculating. It will slow the game down, and actually when you're carrying out activity you're just not supposed to know how effective it might be until actually you've decided to play it. Here you can see a full-size political tracker. The umpires will be there to adjudicate really and just make sure people follow the sequence. Most of this will be open play, and the players will manage most of it. Key thing to bear in mind at this point is that the red is for the Socialists, the People's Republic, black is for the British Union Fascists, blue for the Royalists, and purple for the Anglican League. You'll notice that the numbers in the white boxes, which will be changed slightly in terms of font to make it easier to differentiate them, do vary depending on where you are on the tracker. This is because sometimes when you're very unpopular, it can be very difficult to make yourself more popular, and conversely, once you're pretty popular, it should be quite difficult to make yourself incredibly popular. There are assorted meeples and the like on this tracker. This is just for display. On the day we'll be using counters just to aid visibility. Whilst the umpire is the one who will really be the ones dealing with the finances and calculating income on turns 3, 6 and 9, it is just worth bearing in mind at this point that occupying a declared town is the best way for you to get as much money as possible and also to deny it to others. The reason why the umpires will be pulling counters out of a bag at the start of each turn is to make sure there's some uncertainty and to make sure that people won't always be stuck moving behind the same people, because some cards are more useful against certain factions than others. We think 5 placement rounds each phase at the political table gives a fairly fast game with people having the opportunity to do a bit of bluffing and counter bluffing, but also because you're not looking at the underneath of the counters when you play them, it should be a fairly fast-paced affair. Please make sure that you read the political cards carefully. Some are faction specific, others can be applied to any of the other factions. But it is really important, because if you don't do that and you play an inappropriate card, it will actually still be counted as played and discarded. It's worth noting here that the Royalists have decided to split their 2 counters and apply them into both Lincoln and Scunthorpe. Just because you place 2 or 3 counters in one round doesn't mean they all have to be played together. You can split them both on your own spaces and also those of other teams. Here we can see the first use of counter activity. When you place your counters on someone else's space, whatever the score is on your counter counts against that team. Now we're just getting towards the end of the turn and it's time to start resolving. All 5 rounds have been played, all the counters have been put onto spaces, and now it's a question of working down town by town. Each town is resolved in turn and you do not go back to them. If anyone has forgotten about a card or anything like that that would have been applicable, it's too late. Here you can see how successful counter activity can be, where the socialists, despite not doing very well for themselves, have managed to pretty much neutralise the British Union fascists. In the meantime, the royalists have managed to steal a march because no one's been worried about them. Just note the card here to the left of Sheffield, which was played face down at the start of the turn as per instructions. This will be turned over before the counters are turned over. An unfortunate card for the socialists at this point in time, and unfortunately they don't have any cards that would counter it. It's worth reminding ourselves at this point that even though the socialists have been moved down 1 space on the tracker, it is possible to actually move down 2, or indeed move up 2 in any one turn. Now it might seem as though the fascists are spending an awful lot of political capital in Worksop when they've already got high support, it's declared and occupied. However, they are quite conscious that they don't want the same thing to happen to them as the socialists in Sheffield and be pushed down to medium support, because that would result in a big loss of income. Now at this point the socialists are feeling quite pleased with themselves. They're down in Sheffield, but they're also hoping to push the fascists down into medium support to make sure that they don't actually make any headway, even with the good political activity that's taking place. Now, as I've already said, the umpires themselves will be calculating the income in the second phases of turns 3, 6 and 9, whilst political officers are actually out and about doing their negotiating. The money will then just be presented to senior commanders, but the information will be in the rule book and also presented alongside the political trackers, so you can keep an eye on it if you need to. Economic disruption and civil unrest will be a fact of life in a very British civil war, but it's really important that you try and make sure their impact is minimised, particularly around those important turns 3, 6 and 9. Cards have some impact in that, but also note that civil unrest can be just a result of cumulative economic disruption points. Smaller towns are very quickly going to run out of money that they can donate to you unless you keep on top of this. And here we have a summary of the political game. Possibly slightly more complicated than certain other mega games recently, but it is designed to make sure that political players actually have something to really get their teeth into for at least part of the turn, and then you have got unstructured time in the second half to do your negotiating.